up there just watching moon and stars dancing around the beautiful sky. Yeah. Emotions, devotions, they come and take me so high up to the sky.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Free Thought Forum for Tuesday, October 23rd, 2012. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're first of all, for introductions, my name is Brian Fields, and with me I have Rick Wigton.
Hello.
And first we're going to open up with some news, but our topic for today is going to be Halloween, since it's getting to be that time of the month.
It's that time.
And so we figured we'd talk a little bit about that. But before I get into that, I wanted to tell everybody about what your state legislature's been up to. We have, earlier this month, there was a House Resolution 922 that was, it was introduced on a Monday and then voted on a Wednesday, based on the same non-controversial resolution system, which is Rule 35 in the House of Representatives that the Year of the Bible was based on. This time, it's all about a month of prayer for October. It's the same insanity we've seen over and over again, coming back again. You know, we keep hearing over and over, well, why is this important? Why does it matter? The fact that it is a government promotion of religion should scare anybody who isn't interested in some other religion's form of government or other religion being promoted by the government. And prayer itself, declaring a month of prayer, is a strictly religious activity. And the legislature should not be using their valuable time. And there are a lot of problems in this state, a lot of things going on, and the legislature should not be using their valuable time to promote religion. That should be left up to the churches and to the people who believe in that religion. The government we have a government that, we have a First Amendment supposedly declaring that separation of church and state, by saying that a government may not establish religion. That's the Establishment Clause. For the government to promote religion, that's clearly establishing religion, and it's clearly unconstitutional. Another quick update on the Year of the Bible, which I mentioned earlier, that was House Resolution 535, and the Freedom from Religion Foundation actually took that resolution to court. I don't remember if we mentioned this last month. And they lost because you can't sue legislators for doing what's ostensibly their job. But in the judge's rebuke, and I do say rebuke rather than decision,
The rebuke.
of the legislature for clearly using their time for something that is unconstitutional. The judge clearly told the legislature they shouldn't be doing this. And that's what I think HR 922 is all about, oh, well, the judge told us we can't do that.
So we're going to do it anyway.
So we're going to do it anyway because we're the legislature and that's what we can do. And, you know, we don't need this kind of grandstanding and clearly illegal behavior going on in our legislature. We've got tons of other stuff that we could be doing.
Yeah, they shouldn't be thumbing their noses at the government. It's just pointless. It
Right.
really is. It's just.
And counterproductive, and it's ridiculous.
And how far will they take this? Are we going to have the week of prayer, a day of prayer? I mean, what's next down the line? How does this work? Is it just keep going?
Well, and you know, it's clearly setting up a pattern here because we're not talking about them taking the Year of the Bible and following it on the heels of the Year of the Quran or anything like that.
You never see that.
We're talking about the Year of the Bible, the month of prayer.
Right.
You know, it's clearly promoting a particular type of religion.
Exactly.
And it's wrong on so many levels.
It's just basically to appeal to a base.
Oh, absolutely.
That's all it is. You know, it's grandstanding, like you said. It's just all they're doing is just wasting time trying to score brownie points, basically.
Exactly.
So, Yeah, people should be upset with this, but, you know.
They're not going to be. But I will say that when the vote came down and it passed, this time around, it wasn't unanimous.
Really?
No, it wasn't.
Oh,
We managed to reach 2 legislators and
okay.
explain to them what was going on. I don't know how much you remember about Rule 35, but those resolutions are packaged in such a way where it's, you know, they get shoved right through the legislature so fast that nobody's really paying attention to what's going on unless somebody speaks up.
Says something about it.
So the Secular Coalition for Pennsylvania actually worked hard to contact constituents all over the state and tell them to write their legislators.
Good.
And we managed to pull off 2 legislators that said, no, we're not going to do that.
It's a start.
It's a
It's
start.
a start.
And
Got 2.
we got 2. And considering that the Year of the Bible was unanimous, that everybody that was there voted in favor of it, it is definitely a push in the right direction. So I'm glad to see that.
It's a small start, but it's good.
Exactly. In the religious people picking on other religious people category, mention of a vagina causes an evangelical bookshop to refuse a book, claims an author. Apparently, Christians don't even appreciate Christian women authors
That's right.
who decide that they want to write about their vagina.
Yeah, you're not supposed to mention certain words. I mean,
Exactly.
even the technical term for it, you cannot mention it because I'm not sure what they think is going to happen. What's going to happen if somebody reads that? Are they going to just have a swoon, perhaps? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, go into a fit. It's like cover the children's eyes. I don't know.
Well, and what's funny is that this is an evangelical Christian author. It's not. We're not talking about a liberal author trying to introduce her material. This is an evangelical female Christian author. Rachel Held Evans says the book was snubbed because Christian stores apparently have a thing against vaginas. It's interesting that she's finally figured that out. You know, that
Well, some people are a little slower on the uptake with that kind of stuff. It's like, well, I didn't know. You would find that offensive. I don't understand. But
yeah. But this prominent evangelical author essentially says that her memoir is not being stocked in a major U.S. Christian book chain because it includes the word vagina. Her book is A Year of Biblical Womanhood. Again, not a bastion of liberal thought in that book, probably.
And it's about women.
Exactly.
It's about women.
Exactly. Is her account of the year she spent taking every instruction from the Bible as literally possible. So this is a woman.
Yeah,
she's trying to live as a Christian, you know, apparently because she has a vagina and cares to talk about
mentions it, you know.
Yeah.
Could they maybe use another word, perhaps? I don't know if that would have been acceptable or not. I don't know.
I mean, what are you left with? Once you go with the scientific term and that's the one that gets rejected?
Maybe hoo-hoo? I don't know. How does that work? I'm not sure. Maybe you try to, dumb it down some so you don't even use the technical term. It's not like she was even using a vulgar
Right.
word for it.
There's apparently 2 instances in the book where the word vagina is used.
Oh, 2, wow.
2, yeah. One where she's describing the rape of a Congolese teenager,
Okay.
which I think would probably be appropriate, I mean,
Probably.
considering.
Maybe the rape part was okay, but to say the vagina part was bad.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm just saying.
and then the other one is where she talks about her decision to sign an abstinence pledge. She's signing a pledge.
Signing an abstinence pledge.
An abstinence pledge, right.
Okay.
At age 15, and she used the back of her metal chair to scribble her name across the dotted line before marching to the front of the room to pin her promise to God and to her vagina to a giant corkboard for all to see.
Okay.
She's
She's in with the program. She's to God and her vagina.
yes,
That's dedication.
that is dedication.
That is.
And well,
You really can't make this stuff up.
no, you
really
can't.
can't.
Oh, and they keep coming.
Oh, and there's more.
And more. Well, this one is moving out of the Christian category, but an atheist in Indonesia. I don't know if you've heard about that or our viewers have heard about it, but Alexander An is an Indonesian atheist who has endured a long court trial over his alleged Islamic dissidence.
What
And
horrible
he's-
crime did he do?
His horrible crime is that he posted on an atheist group's Facebook page, "God doesn't exist."
Horrible. Just, I mean,
He's appealing
just
his
terrible.
current prison sentence of 2 years
2 years in prison.
years.
2 years in prison.
and 6 months. 2 years and 6 months. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
That's not anything to sneeze at for
Just writing
saying
one thing.
words.
For a thought crime.
Right.
A thought crime.
Right.
I mean, how crazy do you have to have in a society? How crazy does society have to be where you would put somebody away for 2.5 years just for writing, "I don't believe in God"?
Well, and he has been unable to prove, apparently, at this point, he's arguing that the court has been unable to prove that he committed his crime. And his crime was specifically described as purposefully spreading anti-Islamic messages in order to incite societal dissonance.
That's quite a stretch. It's quite a stretch, that crime.
You know,
Societal dissonance.
if writing "God doesn't exist" incites societal dissonance, in the United States, we must be anarchy.
We must be.
You know, the world must be coming to an end.
Yeah, we are Satan's love child. It's terrible.
But this really goes to show, I think, to the larger picture here. In the wake of some very public comments, many of you probably all remember from a month or two back when that Muslim video came, or
yes.
anti-Muslim video came
The
out.
innocence of Muslim.
The innocence of Muslims.
Yes.
That came out, and there was all the violence and all that stuff. But you know, we hearken back to the freedom of speech, and it really disturbed me to see that here in the U.S. there were a lot of people calling for what was essentially an abridgment of free speech.
Right.
You know, to say, well, there are some things you just can't say.
You can't say. It's too offensive. You
Right.
cannot do this. You cannot say these things.
But this is what happens with that mentality.
Yeah.
This is the end result, is that once you say there is some speech that is not okay, and I'm not talking about inciting to violence or inciting, something where you're actually saying go kill somebody,
Right.
or shouting fire in a crowded theater. I mean, those are things that the courts have long upheld as outside of the realm of free speech. But anything where you're simply expressing an idea, you're
It's an opinion.
It's an opinion.
It's an opinion, and it sends you to prison.
Yes, and to that end, every year the UN gets pressured to push their member states to pass anti-blasphemy laws. It's the Muslim bloc
Yeah.
keeps pushing for it every single year. This year, I have to say that I'm quite impressed that our president,
That was a
stood
very
up
good
and said,
thing, yes.
absolutely not, that we have freedom of speech in this country, and that while it's unfortunate that there's violence going on in other countries and stuff like that, in our country, this is a right of our people to be able to express themselves that's enshrined in our Constitution. And this is why, this is why we have that right, and why it's important to protect that right.
And besides, how do you define blasphemy? I mean, that's kind of a fluid thing. Like,
Well,
what
sure.
does that mean? What does that mean?
It
What's
just as
blasphemy?
easily could have been a Christian
very easily.
that said something that insulted the prophet
Yeah.
Muhammad, or if blasphemy against Christian faith was a crime, a Jew or Muslim saying, Jesus is not the Son of God would be blasphemy.
Blasphemy.
And so you can't, since blasphemy relies on a particular faith tradition in order to define it,
Right.
you can't have a society where everybody lives together and everybody is on equal footing if it's a crime.
Right. You just can't do it. It's like you can't have blasphemy laws because what a person considers is their religion, a tenet of their religion, it could be blasphemy to somebody else.
Right.
So you just can't have, especially in our country with 300 million people, when you have a plethora of different faiths all living together. And, you couldn't even do it. It would be impossible. I know there are people who would probably like to try, but you cannot do that. You cannot define blasphemy and say, okay, we're going to have these blasphemy laws in the United States, and you can't insult people's religion.
Right. Well, moving on, this is actually kind of funny. Speaking of free speech, this happened in Britain, and we're going to try something new this week. It's something we haven't done before, and we're actually going to try to do video. So what I've got here is an atheist is trying his hand at street preaching. He was going through in the UK in the Brighton area. He was walking along and he heard a Christian street preacher and he thought, you know what? I can do that too. If the Christians can do it, I can do it. And I think he had a fantastic message. So I would love to share that with you all today. If we can go ahead and start the video in the back.
People of Brighton, I come here today to bring you a message of atheism, friendly atheism. I came past here a few months ago and there were some preachers here that told me that if I believe in evolution, that my life is meaningless, and that I just am born and I live and I die and that's it. I didn't agree with that. I didn't think that was right because I'm an atheist and I don't think my life is meaningless. So that what can I do about this? I will come out and street preach like this. And you don't have to listen to me because if you don't listen to me, nothing bad is going to happen. There will be no consequences if you don't agree with me. It's fine. But so why did he think that my life was meaningless as an atheist? Well, there are so many different ways of looking at the world, and they can't all be right. You could probably say that most of the ways that we look at the world are probably wrong. We're all pretty much not quite right. So if we're going to get anywhere, what can we agree on? What we can agree on is what is real. And the way that we measure and describe what is real is science. Now, science is a bit of a scary word sometimes, but science isn't always what you think it is. Forget the idea that science is opposed to religion. We all own science. Science belongs to all of us. It's the way that we all explore the universe. Using science and a bit of humility, we can come together on what it is that we actually do agree on and go from there. But if we only use science to describe who we are, does that mean that we become meaningless, that we are just mere blobs of matter? Well, I'd say no. There's nothing mere about being alive. If you look at the sky at night, you see the gigantic stars that are out there and all their blazing significance. They are not significant. It's living creatures that are the significant ones. All of the atoms in all of the stars would wish that they lived inside your head for one lifetime. It's as if there's a cosmic lottery where every atom in the universe is entered into the lottery, and very few of them will win the ultimate prize, which is one lifetime of consciousness, one lifetime in a brain like yours. Now, for me, only humans surely would win the greatest prize in the universe and then hope that there's something more, that prize could go on forever. And surely only humans can find themselves inhabiting the most elegantly sophisticated object in the known universe, our brains, and then not feel special, and then have to make up stories to make us feel special. Well, yes, I am an atheist. I do believe in evolution. Life is short, but life is special, and you are all almost miraculously special. Thank you very much.
So I think he did a great job.
Yes, he did.
He gave himself some ground rules: no knocking religion, no confrontation, no catchphrases. And I think, you know, one of the things you hear all the time about is about angry atheists.
The angry atheists.
Yeah. So if you have this idea out there that atheists are all just angry people that don't see beauty in the universe or anything like that just because we don't believe in God, this is what we're talking about when we say, yes, we feel passionate about the world around us. We feel passionate about human beings, and that this is I think that was I thought that we should share that today.
He was very nice. He was very polite. He even said, "You don't have to agree with me." He
Right.
was like overly polite.
Yeah, there wasn't really an audience that stuck around except for that one guy. He kind of
Yeah.
hung out for a little bit, but there also wasn't any vitriol, and a lot of times when atheists go out in public, that does happen. So I think that it's a good thing, and I was very pleased to see that, and it was one of those things that kind of lifted my day. So I thought I'd share that with everybody here.
Very nice.
Well, I just have one more item here. What does it take to remove a pastor who hangs out at a middle school?
That sounds like an interesting riddle or something, or a joke. What does it take?
A lawsuit.
A lawsuit.
I can't take credit for that one. Actually, that was a question asked by the Friendly Atheist. He's a blog I get a lot of my information from. If you ever, let me give a shout out for him. Check him out online. If you Google Friendly Atheist, you should be able to get to his blog.
Great website, by the way.
It is. So get this. Summit Middle School, Fort Wayne, Indiana. A pastor from a church called The Chapel was allowed to hang out in the cafeteria while students were there, pass out pamphlets, whether they were religious or not, and chat with them as they ate. This wasn't just some random guy. In fact, the students did recognize him as a religious leader, and the school just let it happen. And the only reason we found out about this is because one of the students brought home anti-abortion literature that she got from the pastor, and her parents began questioning what was going on. The ACLU helped, and the family filed a lawsuit against the school on a Friday morning at 8:45 a.m. 15 minutes later,
15 minutes?
the Southwest Allen County School District's attorney sent the ACLU an email. The ACLU attorney said that the school district's attorney phoned him around 9 a.m. to say the district was ending the practice. In other words, they had to file a federal lawsuit to get 15-minute response to say, okay, we won't do it anymore.
This should have been such a no-brainer. Why did they have him there to be? Why would they let him in? It was like, people are supposed to be able to wander into school cafeterias.
If I, as a parent, walked into my school district's cafeteria and I sat down with a bunch of atheist literature and started handing it out to the students, I'd be thrown out of my ear.
You would be thrown out, probably arrested.
I wouldn't do it either because it's wrong, but I mean, this is one of those, you hear the term privilege thrown around. This is what we call Christian privilege. This is a situation where, you talk about rights, and we all have the rights to free speech and stuff like this, but this is something where this is not a right anybody has unless you are Christian. Because the administrators agree with your religion, they're letting you come in because they think that's a good thing to do.
Right. It's like you would never see a Muslim cleric being allowed to go in, or a Hindu priest or whatever. But because it's a Christian minister, it's like, oh, it's okay. He can come in and talk to the students and things.
Right. And this is the kind of biases we're talking about when we have this program and we talk about the things we get concerned about. These are constantly going on. These are the kind of things we deal with day in and day out, where we don't ask for special rights. We ask for a level playing field. You get to believe what you want to believe. We get to believe what we want to believe, and nobody gets the right to push their beliefs on our children. And the way to do that is to protect our schools by enforcing the separation of church and state. So it's this craziness. I just.
But it's interesting that some of the people who responded to that, some of the Christians, they were saying that. Well, at first they made sort of this really very naive assumption. Well, how do you know he was, out there preaching to kids? It's like,
Because-
well, he's a minister. What?
Well, not only that, but the girl
know.
brought home anti-abortion literature.
That's true, too.
I mean, seriously, at that point in time, you know what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, there's now evidence. There's not even a question.
Other people said, well, it's good to have him there because he would help students with their problems. It's like, okay, but they know how to find a clergy person if they want somebody to talk to. They don't need somebody, especially this one guy coming in and talking to them. If you're going to do that, you have to open up for everybody.
Right.
You have to open up for Jehovah's Witnesses. You have to open for Mormons. You have to open up for everybody to come in. And then kids won't be able to eat their lunch because they'll have people preaching to them all the time.
Right.
It's crazy. It really is.
And if you're watching this show, would you want a Mormon coming in and talking to your kid at school and trying to convert them? Would you want a Muslim doing the same thing? Or do you think it's perfectly okay for a Christian to come in? Or do you agree with us or disagree with us? If you do, please give us a call. Our number is 717-846-5067. This is a live TV show, so we'd love to hear your comments. We've just finished our news updates. We're going to move into our main topic for this evening, which is Halloween. So we've got our nice decoration up here today. Our pumpkin friend, jack-o'-lantern friend, I suppose.
Jack-o'-lantern. We're getting into the feel of the holiday.
Yes. But Rick, so do you want to talk a little bit about Halloween?
Yes, Halloween is actually one of my favorite holidays when I was a child, and it's been celebrated for a long, long time. And people say, well, how did it get started? And Halloween was started by the Celts. Those are the people that lived in Ireland and England and certain parts of France, like the northwestern part of France, about 2,000 years ago. They had this festival called Samhain. Samhain was when it was the end of the harvest season, the end of summer, beginning of winter for them. Their New Year's was November 1st. So the day before that, they had this big celebration where they would have bonfires, they would dress up in costumes and things, and have a big festival. And they believed that during this period of time that the veil between the two worlds was very thin. And what that means is that you could communicate with the dead. And sometimes they believed the spirits of the dead would walk among them. And that would get a little frightening for them at times because, some of these spirits were evil spirits. So what they would do is they would often leave food outside their doors to kind of appease these spirits so they wouldn't bother them. And they would also, if they went outside, they were afraid that they would be attacked by spirits. So they would dress up and they would put on costumes so that the spirits would think they were one with them. So they put on ugly costumes and wander around, they would feel safe. And it was a festival that they held every year. Now, when the Romans took over and conquered the Celts, they, as many times as often happens, that they adopted their festival, but they added some of the things on of their own. They had a festival for the goddess Pomona, and she was the goddess of fruits and trees, and her symbol was the apple, where we get the old bobbing for apples game, and that was it just grew together. Now, when Christianity came into the area, they had this festival going on, and they wanted to sort of co-opt it so that they would, not feel pressured to, go into their other Samhain festivals, that they would have a Christian version of it. And so what happened in 609 A.D., we have Pope Boniface IV gave a proclamation that there was going to be All Saints' Day, or All Martyrs' Day, I should say. It was originally scheduled for May 13th, but eventually Pope Gregory III decided we were going to move it to November 1st because that's when the Celts and everybody in that area were celebrating the Samhain festival. And it was pretty much a lot of times what you would see what we have now. They would have festivals, they would hand out goods to the poor and things. And in medieval times, one of the things that they had was they had what they called soul cakes, what they would hand out to poor people would come around and beg. And these were just little cakes that were filled with raisins, and they would hand them out, and with the promise that the people who got the cakes would pray for the dead relatives of the person that was handing it out. And so you had these little rituals that were started. It was basically a very religious holiday. And over time, it started to develop to become more and more secular. But originally it was very religious. And also during this time, as we got towards the Puritans period, that witches started to be associated with Halloween, because that was also, like I said, that was the night of the veil was the thinnest between the two worlds, and they would get a lot of power. So you have a lot of the traditions would start coming around. Like a lot of times witches, people were accused of being witches were single women who were healers, maybe they were a little eccentric, and so they were kind of picked on as being different, and they were witches. And so a lot of the things that we come to be associated with witches today came from medieval period. The pointy hat was a takeoff of the peasant hat. It was sort of exaggerated. And cauldrons and brooms were very common in anybody's household. And so they came up with these ideas that witches were brewing secret stuff in their cauldrons, and that they would fly to witches' meetings on brooms. They came up with all these bizarre legends of what was going on. And of course, then you had cats, which they considered sort of familiars, I think they're called, for the devil. And I think it was also because the cats were sort of mysterious and their eyes glow in the dark, and people get all kind of spooked with cats, so they became associated with witches. Our favorite friend, Jack-o'-lantern. There are different stories for Jack-o'-lantern. One was a story about a man named Stingy Jack, who was not a nice man. It's a sort of a convoluted long story, but in essence, to kind of break it down, what he did, he tricked the devil into promising that he would never go to hell, even though he was a bad man. So when he did die, the devil had to keep his promise that he wouldn't send him to hell. He couldn't go to heaven because he was a bad man. So the devil sort of got his due, because Jack was then forced to walk the earth for the rest of his life looking for rest. And as sort of a token of his esteem, the devil gave him a burning ember to help guide him, and he kept it in a carved out turnip. He would walk around with a turnip. And so this ended up being part of the Halloween festival, which I've sort of brought up before, means All Hallowed Eve. And when it came to America, because turnips are very small and it doesn't quite have the same effect as Mr. Jack-o'-lantern, they started doing it with pumpkins. So there you have the pumpkin face glowing in the dark, which is supposed to, ward off evil spirits and things. There's a lot of legends around Jack-o'-lantern, but, the whole Jack-o'-lantern thing with Stingy Jack, who was called Jack of the Lantern, and then it came just Jack-o'-lantern. And so you had that. But it became a secular holiday. The Puritans didn't celebrate it, but it became a secular holiday in the 1800s in America. And it was only celebrated in certain areas. But when the Irish had the major immigrations in the late 1800s, then it became very popular because they brought those traditions with them. And it was actually in Pennsylvania, they had the first Halloween parade. 1905 in Allentown was the first Halloween parade.
I didn't know that.
Yes, first Halloween parade. And during the 20s and 30s, it became more of what we think of today, people going from house to house, the trick-or-treating thing. But in the 30s, it became quite a problem for many cities, because so many kids would get involved with vandalism. They start torching buildings, stealing, breaking windows, and it would also started to be called Devil's Night, because people were afraid. And it was costing cities thousands of dollars to clean this up, So as an aside, when people talk about how great things were in the good old days, back in the 30s, around Halloween, hell broke loose. Hell broke loose. So in the 1950s, they decided what they were going to do was kind of organize it. So we had more parades, we had more organized games, we had all kinds of things, and it became what we know today. From the 1950s on, everything with people wearing the mask. And it's a $6 billion a year industry right now.
Right.
It's very, very popular.
It's funny you mentioned about, the 30s and hell breaking loose. What you've got here is a series of stories that have essentially given people permission,
to act out.
To act out.
Yes.
And so that's that's just the thing there. When your responsibility is outside yourself, when you say, well, I believe in something, demons out there causing really bad things, it's just funny, how humans will take advantage of that opportunity to.
But Halloween has delved into sort of having some crazy conspiracy, bizarre.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Recently.
Yeah, as recently as
Well, the 1970s and 80s were really big for the whole, people are sacrificed on Halloween. Mm-hmm. That was started. Do you remember Mike Warnke?
I do. It's funny because I was a teenager when. I mean, when did he?
He wrote the Satan Cellar in 1972. That was his
Right.
bestseller.
But when was he caught?
He was caught in 1992.
Right. It was right about the time.
Christianity Today did an expose on him.
Yeah.
So for him to be the fraud that he is.
Yeah. The year before, I think it was like the year or two before that happened. I was a teenager or just preteen. And my youth group was all about Mike Warnke. He's so fantastically funny. He was funny. He was.
I still have his LP.
Oh, really?
Yes,
I
I do.
wouldn't go that far to say that.
I
But,
have an LP, yes, from Mike Warnke from back in the 70s when I was involved in the evangelical church.
Right. But yeah, aside from him, for those who don't know, aside from him writing the book about, the Satan Cellar stuff, aside from that, he was a well-known Christian comedian.
He was very well-known.
He did the whole circuit, and but I remember our youth group, watching videos of him, and we all enjoyed that. And it was right
funny.
before, it was right before it came out that he had
Yes.
made the whole thing.
He made the whole thing up. Christianity Today, to their credit, did an expose on him. And his story, in a nutshell, was during the 60s, he was a satanic high priest. And he was rising up through the ranks, and then he became part of the Illuminati, which, for conspiracy buffs, that's like this, the ultimate in conspiracy organizations,
Right.
Illuminati. And he was going up through the ranks, and there's different stories about how he got kicked out of the Illuminati or something. He knew too much or something, and they tried to kill him and all this other stuff. So he ended up joining the Navy, and he had a born-again experience in the Navy, and then after that, he did his little preacher thing. But Christianity Today found out that he didn't do any of those things, that he was a born-again Christian during the 60s in his college time, and that he was never part of a cult or anything. And he also raised a lot of money trying to save kids from satanic cults.
Right.
And that went to furnish his rather lavish lifestyle. He had a very big mansion. He's been married 4 times. And his whole facade came crumbling down after the 1992 expose from Christianity Today. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I thought he was funny back then. And some of his stories, even as a Christian kid, I thought were sort of far-fetched. He would tell these stories about, flying in private jets and all these big wig satanic people. They're all over the place, and that they're, big wig politicians who were involved in it. And, it's all nonsense.
Right. Well, and it's funny because, it was such an outrageous lie. I mean, it wasn't, he didn't lie little. I mean, it's not like he fudged a couple things.
No, you got to go big if you're going to lie. Just go big.
He went all out. And evangelicals ate it up.
Oh, they loved it.
Yeah. It was something that because he was such a trusted brother of the community and all that other stuff, of course, everything he said is accurate. And, there's an Illuminati, and he must have been part of it, and the satanic stuff. And, and in the 80s, of course, you had the SRA scares, the satanic ritual abuse scares as well. And it all fed into everything.
It just flowed perfectly.
Yeah, exactly.
But do you remember, before we go into satanic abuse, do you remember a person named John Todd?
No, that one's
John Todd, I remember, he was big in the late 70s. He was almost exactly like Mike Warnke. He had the same story, satanic priest, he was on the run, all this other stuff. And I remember a part of a youth group I was in the late 70s, we were listening to a tape from John Todd. And it was all conspiracy stuff, and that there's a satanic plot to rule the world, children are being sacrificed. He was a rather well-known, not as big as Mike Warnke, but he was very well-known. And he met his demise in, I think it was 1998. He was convicted of molesting young boys, and he went sent to prison. No, it was 1988, I'm sorry. 1988, he went to prison, got out in 2004, died in 2007. But he, for a long time, for at least in the late 70s, he was very popular too, with the whole satanic thing.
Right.
But both he and Warnke kind of led this whole craziness that started in the 80s about the satanic abuse thing, which kind of made the country go crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, there was all kinds of conspiracy ideas, especially, well, I mean, you talk about Halloween and the devil, and, to fundamentalists, for those who don't understand, the devil is a real being, and that real being has a direct effect on everybody's life. The devil is constantly interested in screwing up your life. And so it's not that far of a stretch.
No.
To say, okay, well, there's people who are in league with the devil and actively trying to destroy our civilization.
Remember, Pat Robertson said that people of Haiti in the 1800s made a pact with the devil.
That was repeated from my pastor, and that was one of those things. There were missionaries going to Haiti, and it was so necessary because. Haiti is made a pact with the devil, and how are we going to? We have to save these people. So our church had missionaries going down there, and we had missionaries come up and talk and all that other stuff. There was the whole thing, and it's.
Makes you wonder who notarized that. I mean, how did that work? Do you have lawyers on somebody's side, and who's speaking for the Haitian people who signed this contract?
Who's speaking for the devil?
I would assume the devil himself would show up. Oh, yeah. If it's a big thing like that, a whole country, Haiti, have to be the whole devil.
Yeah, but I don't know. Haiti's such a little country.
That's true, but
I mean, maybe if the president of the United States decided to sign that kind of pact, but Haiti, I don't know. I mean, he's got to. You'd think he'd delegate that.
You would think, like Beelzebub or something, or whatever.
Yeah,
whoever,
Mephistopheles.
That would be a good thing to go there, but. I'd love to see where the papers are that they drew up for this pact. I mean, they have to be somewhere. You would probably think they're in Port-au-Prince or something, but I don't know.
Yeah.
If you know where these copies are, please let us know, because I'd love to see them.
It's funny because one of the things I hear over and over and over again when we go out and we table at booths and stuff like that is people saying, I used to be a Satanist, or I used to be an atheist, and now I've found God, and so on and so forth. And what I've found that really means is I used to not believe as strongly as I believe now. Because really, for a lot of especially evangelical fundamentalist Christians, the idea that they didn't believe as strongly as they believe at that point means that they weren't properly saved, or they weren't properly following their faith. In the tradition I grew up in, in the church I grew up in, it was very common for there to be altar calls for whatever the circumstance. It doesn't matter what it is, anything. You would come up, you would rededicate yourself to Christ, because of course you hadn't done enough up to that point in time. Everybody is all They really pressured you to think, well, you may have said you're saved, but maybe you're really not saved. And there was always that
doubt in your mind,
that constant fear of not having done enough. And
I've done dozens of altar calls.
Oh, me too.
Just to be sure.
Absolutely.
I'm not quite sure. I just better go up there again.
Yeah, and when I was a kid, I didn't think anything of it. And about a few years back, my grandmother passed away, and I went up to her funeral, and of course it was in the same church that I grew up in.
Okay.
Not that particular one, but another one of the same denomination.
Okay.
And we're at the funeral. The mourners are there. My grandmother's casket is up there. We're all talking about my grandmother, and all of a sudden, bam, out of nowhere, altar call.
Altar call
at my grandmother's funeral.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, that's hardcore.
I was actually pretty offended. I mean, I was like, "You're kidding, right?" My grandmother. You have a bunch of mourners there mourning my grandmother, and you are going to use that to try to manipulate people into rededicating their lives to Christ. Really?
Yeah. These are the same people that go to disasters and run around and do that too. It's like when people that are most vulnerable.
Right.
It's like they're running around. What you need is God.
Right. But there's a lot of fear that keeps getting thrown into that. And, you know, in Halloween time, of course, we have the hell houses that creep up. And for those who don't know what a hell house is, it's a Halloween attraction that's usually put on by fundamentalist Christians. And they've been essentially teaching children how not to go to hell since the 1970s, when they were created by Jerry Falwell. They're notorious for disguising themselves as conventional haunted houses because, you know, we want to draw in people who don't know.
You don't know that you're going to.
And the actors act out various unforgivable evils. And amongst the evils that they talk about, if you've ever read Jack Chick tracts,
Oh, yes.
you probably get an idea of a lot of things that they're gonna portray. But I mean, premarital sex, homosexuality, belief in evolution, abortion, drug usage, Dungeons and Dragons, suicide, heavy metal music, punk rock, and pornography. And remember, these things are geared towards young children. They're not geared towards adult. They're not trying to get you and me in there and convince us of anything. They're trying to scare the crap out of your kids. They're trying to get your kids in the door. And then they say, you know, these actions are all sponsored by the devil. And anything you do along these lines, you know, preteens, going to be teenagers, we're talking about things like sexuality and stuff like that.
Exactly.
You know, as soon as you start reacting to your natural feelings that you get, you know, that's of the devil.
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah. And so you're sometimes, you know, so at the end, you know, they take you through all these sins. And essentially the devil is giving you a tour of the sinners in hell and what they've been doing.
Yeah, they're being tortured.
Yeah, and how they get tortured. I mean, it's pretty graphic. A lot of them are pretty graphic. And at the end, of course, you know, they take you through and they say, if you accept Christ, you're going to go to heaven. And, of course, in heaven, everybody's happy and all that other stuff. And they usually, a lot of times, they'll have them sign pledges.
Oh, yeah.
To God, that they're going to accept God as their personal savior and go to heaven. But, I mean, it's really an emotional manipulation tactic.
Well, there's so many things that they have listed that'll send you to hell. I mean, Dungeons and Dragons. You play Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to go to hell. I've heard people you do yoga, you'll go to hell.
Right.
If you do this and that, heavy metal music.
Heavy metal was a big one. You know, that was one when I was terrified of heavy metal when I was a kid.
Oh, yeah.
And which, of course, you know, when I decided I had enough of Christianity, I dove in and looked into every form of music that was previously forbidden to me.
Listen to a lot of Ozzy Osbourne, did you?
Metallica. And, yeah. Oh, yeah. And, you know, that was right about the time that the Black Album came out. The Metallica Black Album came out. I loved listening to The God That Failed. You know, that was a good one for me. But
kind of fit right in.
On some extent, it validated what I was being told about the music. But on the other hand, I enjoyed it, so it's all good.
You notice they don't have like Slim Whitman listed there, which I think would send you directly to hell. I mean,
yeah.
Seriously, Slim Whitman.
Yeah. But yeah, the hell houses, I mean, they're simply an emotional manipulation tactic. I mean, let's get your child in there. Let's tell them that if they don't behave properly, that they're going to go to hell, that God is out there watching everything you do, and if you step out of line, you're tortured for eternity. And of course, that's supposed to be an ethical lesson.
Yeah, it's a lovely lesson for children.
Yes. But God
loves you, but he will burn you forever if you don't follow him.
But if you see a haunted house, here's a quick tip. You know, we are in that season. But if you see a haunted house and it's sponsored by a church, I would strongly recommend giving it a miss.
Yeah.
Because, you know, especially if it's a fundamentalist church. Because 9 times out of 10, it's not the happy-go-lucky haunted house.
No, it's not the jump-out boo thing. It's more of a, you know, if you masturbate, you'll go to hell type thing. So you really don't want to go there. It's
right.
Just,
or write books that include vagina.
Yeah, that too. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't have someone reading that book, as soon as they get to that one word, they just burst
this
into
word
flames.
is verboten. You cannot say this word.
Say this word and be saved.
yeah, but yes, and you know, this whole fear led into, you know, the satanic ritual abuse,
Yeah,
and you want to talk a little bit about
It kind of went a little crazy with the satanic abuse thing. It was one of the first things, like I said, Mike Warnke and John Todd kind of had the satanic thing going on with the ritual sacrifices of human beings. And then there was this book in 1980 called Michelle Remembers by Michelle Smith, who went around saying that she had been sexually abused, ritually abused by a satanic coven. And her husband, Lawrence, I believe it's called Pansder, he coined the phrase ritual abuse. And he became an expert on this, supposedly. And he would go around the country talking about this. And it's one of these things that sort of snowballed. It was one of those things that, especially when the McMartin preschool situation came up. And let's see, where did that happen? Oh, that was 1983, the McMartin preschool. And within months, 100 preschools were having the same type of accusations. People saying that these children were being sexually abused, that they were forced into satanic rituals. It really went completely crazy. And we had a whole cottage industry jump up on this. People who were experts, supposedly, on satanic abuse. And the thing with the McMartin preschool trial is the fact that when you actually look at the testimony and stuff and how they got the testimony, it's also manipulative of these children. They ask leading questions, they threaten the kids, they would respond favorably to the answers they wanted, they would be angry if they didn't give them the right answers. I remember in the past hearing a tape recording of one of the interrogators screaming at a child, demanding that the child tell the truth about what happened there and who was sacrificed. And
Right.
the child was saying nobody was sacrificed. And she was saying, you're lying to me. Who was sacrificed? And then the kid is crying at this point and said, Billy. And he said, Billy who? Who is Billy? So he says, I don't know, Billy. So, it took this as, you know, at face value. Oh, well, this is obviously true. He said Billy was sacrificed. It's like we were screaming at this child. And it was horrible. And this went on for several years with the McMartin thing. And they had all kinds of really bizarre accusations, like traveling hot air balloons, underground tunnels where they would take the children to have orgies. There were orgies at car washes at airports, children being flushed down toilets to secret rooms where they were abused and then cleaned up and brought back again and given to their unsuspecting
How
parents.
does that work?
I'm not really sure how you flush a child down the toilet and bring him back up. I guess better, though. Children being raped with knives, including a 12-inch blade with sticks, forks, and magic wands. They were assaulted by a clown in a magic room, being forced to drink urine. All this is supposedly taking place at a preschool, you know. But the thing was, there was absolutely no evidence of any of this.
Right.
None. And you would think if a child's being raped with a knife, that obviously there'd be some sort of physical evidence of this, but there was nothing.
Right.
And this crazy trial went on for 2 years, and they were eventually exonerated. Mm-hmm. But the whole satanic panic thing just kept going. It spread in other
Right,
countries.
and their reputations were ruined. And,
yeah, people's
and-
reputations are
and
ruined.
jobs and lives and stuff. And you know, it was funny that there was around the same. I mean, you know, the 80s, 90s had a lot of really freaky scares come through. I mean, we were talking about, you know, the evil of Dungeons and Dragons, and I thought I'd mention there was a woman. This is a pattern you have with these fear groups that you know, what they do is they set themselves up as a supposed expert. You know, I know all about this particular problem. And then they go around and they talk to police groups and so on and so forth. And, you know, they let them come in and say their piece. And then all of a sudden you've got a bunch of people primed for a bunch of crazy stuff. In the same time frame, Patricia Pooling had an anti-occult program from Richmond, Virginia. She founded a group called Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons.
Really?
And she went around to destroy role-playing games. And the reason she did it is because her son was depressed and committed suicide, and he happened to play Dungeons and Dragons.
So to her, that's a direct correlation.
Exactly.
Played that. Not the fact
Yeah.
that he may have eaten at a certain fast food restaurant, that would have done it. You know,
Right.
you could pick anything.
Exactly.
And say that's what did it.
Yeah, and so I mean that's essentially what came together here is, you know, and it's similar to the story here. You know, people have this personal predisposition for looking for a particular set of circumstances that are evil or wrong for society, and then they're teaching that, you know, really bad information. But she filed suit against Dungeons and Dragons publishers. She filed a wrongful lawsuit, death lawsuit. She was on 60 Minutes with Gary Gygax, who created Dungeons and Dragons. But when all of her lawsuits were dismissed, that's when she went and she found it bad. So she had no evidence of that there was any wrongdoing by anybody. She went to court, lost everything, and bothered about Dungeons and Dragons, and then started going around to police and telling them all about the things that Dungeons and Dragons promotes, like demonology, witchcraft, voodoo, murder, rape, blasphemy, suicide, assassination, insanity, sex perversion, homosexuality, prostitution, satanic-type rituals, gambling, barbarism, cannibalism, sadism, desecration, demon summoning, necromantics, divination, and other teachings.
All that. From
All of that. Dungeons and Dragons is doing all of that.
All of that.
And, it achieved some success in the conservative Christian areas and mainstream outlets as well. But when they went and they became a consultant to law enforcement and got involved in several lawsuits, all of them lost in court. She then became the director of the National Coalition of TV Violence in 1984. She was the author of a book, The Devil's Web, Who is Stalking Your Children for Satan. Oh, we have a caller. We've got a few minutes, but welcome. Thank you for calling in. Hello?
Yeah,
Ah.
Hi, thank you for calling.
sure. You're welcome.
And what would you like to talk about?
Well, I just like a comment. I mean, like everything that you're saying, doesn't this start at home?
Which part?
The whole thing about the church, Dungeons and Dragons, isn't...
Well, what do you mean exactly about it starting at home? What start at home?
Like the religion, it should start at home. It shouldn't start anywhere else, or the haunting houses and stuff like that. Where's the parents going to...
Oh, I see. So you're asking about why parents don't get involved in teaching their children, the right thing, even though the rest of the world is teaching them the wrong things?
Well, in general, I mean, you could watch... Well, sort of. I mean, you could see stuff on TV and say, oh, that's the wrong thing. I mean, kids need to know that's entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that I was talking about Patricia Pooling. One of the questions that comes up in the cases that came up through here is, she had a particular point of view about Dungeons and Dragons that came up after she essentially didn't have any involvement in her son's life, and Dungeons and Dragons was a convenient scapegoat for the problems that her son was having. And so in that case, yeah, I mean, parents should definitely be more involved in what their children are doing and know what their children are getting involved in. But, as far as Dungeons and Dragons, I wouldn't say, well, Dungeons and Dragons is the problem here. The problem is that you've got a kid who's depressed and a mother who knows nothing about it.
And the guilt. The guilt that she feels.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Very good point.
It is a very good point.
I mean, at the same time, I mean, if he's depressed, she should have seen that, because depression, it slowly builds up.
That's right. And it's hard for parents, I think, sometimes to recognize when that's going on with their children. But, if you do see the warning signs with your kids or catch on that there may be a problem, there are a lot of resources out there. I don't know off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
that have like checklists of warning signs, slipping grades and stuff like that.
Well, parents know if your children are depressed because their children's attitude changes. It just doesn't happen, one night.
Right.
My
they
child
need to
comes
be more
home and
observant.
he or she's depressed. There's
Right.
symptoms that go in it. And I know we're in a society where TV is the best friend, computers are our best friend.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like to me parents just don't care anymore.
Right, I understand. Well, thank you for calling.